India and Russia are enjoying a strong bond of friendship and chemistry for many decades. Prime Minister Modi is visiting Russia this week to take bilateral, special and privileged strategic partnership to a new height. To talk about prospects and agenda of the visit and the scope and goals of deepening bilateral relationship, we have with us Indian Ambassador to Russia, DB Venkatesh Varma. Mr. Ambassador, very warm welcome from News Service Division of All India Radio. Ambassador, first of all, I request you to please brief our listeners about the significance of the Prime Minister's visit for the bilateral relations.
India enjoys very old and time-tested relations with Russia. Russia is one of those countries with which India has greatly benefited from its friendship. But India is also one of those countries that Russia greatly respects. That said, Prime Minister will be paying an official visit to Russia, to Vladivostok, for two reasons. One, he will be the chief guest at the Eastern Economic Forum, which he will address on the 5th of September. On the 4th of September, he will participate in the 20th annual summit between India and Russia. He is visiting Vladivostok at the invitation of President Vladimir Putin has invited our Prime Minister for this special event, a special guest, keeping in mind the importance that India occupies in Russia's foreign policy, but also the contribution that India can make with respect to development of the Russian Far East.
Sir, India and Russia have diversified their relations and expanded their cooperation in plethora of areas. What are the main focus points of the 20th India-Russia Annual Summit?
Of course, the very meaning of an annual summit is our leaders meet every year. Last year, President Putin visited India in October, 19th annual summit, and Prime Minister is visiting for the 20th annual summit here in Vladivostok. Since we have a very old relationship and our leaders meet annually, but also on the sidelines of various international events, the annual summit is an occasion for a review of our cooperation and also to establish new areas of cooperation. The two leaders will review the traditional pillars of our bilateral cooperation, that is in the field of economic and trade ties, defense, nuclear and space. In all these areas, we have cooperation that goes back several decades. Energy is also another area where India and Russia have been long-time partners. But with this summit, we expect new dimensions of our cooperation to emerge and be established and endorsed at their leaders' level. In all these matters, of course, the support of our leaders is absolutely critical, and I am happy to inform your listeners that between India and Russia, the relationship of trust and confidence between Prime Minister Modi and President Putin is at the topmost level.
So, as you said, Prime Minister is also taking part as chief guest in the 5th Eastern Economic Forum. Which type of cooperation both countries are looking through this platform?
The Eastern Economic Forum, as you rightly noted, is a very important platform. It is a platform focusing on economic cooperation, but also with a very strong regional context. The Russian Far East, of course, is long distance from the European part of Russia, but of course is an increasingly important part of Russia because of the regional situation. The countries of Mongolia, China, the two Koreas, Japan are neighboring to this. But India also has had very strong relations with the Russian Far East. You would recall that in 1992, India was one of the first countries to establish a consulate in Vladivostok. There are a number of resources in the Russian Far East which are of interest to India, be it agriculture, timber, mineral resources, coking coal with respect to diamonds, gold, coal, oil and gas, energy resources, but also with respect to people-to-people contacts, with respect to labor migration, skill development, educational sphere in which India and Russia can cooperate. I'm happy to note that over 200 Indian students study in Vladivostok, and there are already plans and contacts between the Federal Far East University of Vladivostok and a number of Indian universities to attract Indian students to come to Vladivostok. Tourism is also another sector. So all in all, we expect cooperation to develop, to be consolidated in old areas, but in new areas, new pathways of cooperation will be established.
Mr. Varma, both countries have set a target to further expand bilateral trade up to $30 billion by 2025. On what strategies and roadmap the two countries are working to achieve the goal?
Our leaders have set the target of expanding our bilateral trade to $30 billion by 2025. The last year, our rate of growth of bilateral trade was about 17 to 18%, and I think that is a pretty good indicator of the increasing interest in India and Russia in expanding their cooperation. The traditional areas of cooperation between India and Russia, of course, are tea, textiles, pharmaceuticals, machine parts and others. We intend to build on this and find new avenues for growth. However, both India and Russia will agree on a new strategy of economic development to boost trade, and that strategy will be endorsed in the Vladivostok summit.
Mr. As you said, there are here many countries around this region, and we are intending to work with them. Eurasian Economic Union and India are in talk for free trade zone. What are the prospects and how India will be benefited through this agreement?
You see, the Eurasian Economic Union is a collection of countries which have close relations with Russia. Since we have bilateral relations with Russia which are of excellent quality, it's in our interest that we also establish good links, good economic and trading links, because the integration process in the Eurasian space is deepening. We have already commenced discussions on a trade agreement. We are looking at some early harvest of issues by the year end, by December 2019. We expect substantial progress to be indicated in these discussions.
For bilateral trade, good transportation is a prime factor. As both countries are working on Vladivostok and Chennai sea route and northern sea route, please brief about these plans for our listeners, and when these projects are expected to complete, and what other connectivity efforts are in fray.
Of course, connectivity is an issue, but I think we are undertaking a number of measures to ease the difficulties that our people or traders and economic interactions face in dealing with Russia. First of all, the international north-south corridor, which passes through Iran and the southern part of Russia into Europe and Russia, is making slow but steady progress. We are already looking at some trial runs of the freight corridor that will use the north-south corridor. Some progress is being made. You rightly mentioned our interest in the Chennai-Vladivostok route. Of course, there is nothing to prevent traders from using container ships or container facilities leaving Chennai, leaving to Vladivostok, but to create greater facilitation for our traders in terms of connections, in terms of customs clearance procedures, and also the financial incentives for traders to use this route, I think will benefit both countries. The northern sea route is opening up because of climatic changes in the Arctic. This is something that will be taken forward. Of course, we are in touch with Russia. Russia is the major coastal region, coastal state with respect to the northern sea route. But I'm confident that given the very friendly relations between India and Russia, more progress will be made.
Mr. Mesraj, as you said, that we have lots of opportunity in mining and agriculture, primary sector, even in manufacturing and MSME sector, especially because it's important for the employment, and the world economies are going through a slowdown. Do both nations have a roadmap to cooperate in these fields to generate employment and trade also?
Yes, of course. You would recall that at the beginning of August, our Minister for Commerce and Industry, Mr. Piyush Goyal, led a very big Indian delegation to Vladivostok. He was accompanied by over 150 business people, but also 4 chief ministers of states of India, which for the first time played a very active role in exploring opportunities in Vladivostok. It was quite a unique delegation. One of the emphasis in that delegation was to explore opportunities for employment, skill development, and educational exchanges between India and Russia in general, but also the states and the Far East of Russia in particular. There were some important MOUs that were signed, especially in matters of skill development, and we hope that this is something that we can take forward in the months and years to come.
So hydrocarbon is very important for India as we import around 70% of our consumption. What are the opportunities on which the two countries are working?
Hydrocarbon cooperation is, of course, one of the pillars of our cooperation in the energy sector between India and Russia. Russia is one of the biggest energy producers in the world. India is one of the biggest energy consumers in the world. Of course, a lot of energy is available on the international market, but in this international situation of uncertainty, it is good to have long-term energy partnerships with reliable countries. And we see Russia as a very reliable long-term partner in energy cooperation. Our Minister of Petroleum and Natural Gas, Shri Dharmendra Pradhan, visited Moscow at the end of August, where he met his counterpart, Mr. Alexander Novak, and they agreed on a 5-year plan of cooperation between India and Russia, where all these issues of cooperation were identified. We are confident that this will emerge as one of the strongest pillars of cooperation between India and Russia.
Likewise, nuclear energy is also important for India. Both countries are working for a long time on it. What is the future plan to expand the civil nuclear cooperation?
Civil nuclear cooperation is also one of the pillars of our cooperation. You would recall that in Kudankulam in Tamil Nadu state, 2 reactors, each of 1,000 megawatts each, have been already in operation, which was built by Russian support. That is KK1 and KK2. Both are operational today and are supplying much needed electricity to many of the southern states, including the state of Tamil Nadu. KK3 and 4, that is the third and the fourth reactors, are under construction, and their construction is proceeding according to schedule. KK5 and 6, which is the fifth and the sixth reactors, the land is being cleared and the land is being prepared for the construction process to take place. India and Russia, of course, are very traditional partners in nuclear energy. Russia has been supportive of India in the international stage as well on number of nuclear issues. Russia supports India's membership of the Nuclear Suppliers Group. So I think the prospects for cooperation between India and Russia in the nuclear field are indeed very bright.
Is any big announcement of defense deal expected during this visit?
Normally during Prime Minister's visits, the focus is not on specific deals, but on agreements which facilitate deepening of defense cooperation between India and Russia. We expect a very major agreement on spare parts manufacture in India of Russian defense companies, which will also strengthen the Make in India component of our defense program in India. As you know, a large percentage of our armed forces are equipped with weapons that are of Soviet origin or have been supplied by Russia. There has been sometimes a problem in smooth supply of spare parts from Russia. Now what this will do is to create the basis for manufacture of these spare parts in India, so that in terms of cost, in terms of time required for the supply, and in terms of indigenization of the spare parts manufacture, this agreement will play a very, very major role.
So India is about to witness a great achievement of rover landing on moon, and India and Russia are working on a space project for a long time. What space opportunities both countries are looking for to work jointly in coming future?
Well, yet again, we all are keeping our fingers crossed, and our prayers are all looking upwards towards the moon. We are very confident that given India's very high quality technological capabilities amongst our space community, our Chandrayaan project will make very major strides in the next few days. Yes, indeed. And I'm sure our leadership, while it is in Vladivostok, will also be keeping track of the progress that is being made. So we are all very excited about this. With respect to Russia, of course, Russia again in this sphere has been a very close partner. You recall that Rakesh Sharma was actually sent up, and the first Indian to go into space was sent on the top of a Soyuz Soviet rocket. The Gaganyaan project is now the next big issue, the big step where India-Russia cooperation is coming about. The Gaganyaan project will involve Indian astronauts going on Indian spacecraft. But however, since this is the first time we are putting humans into space on our own, we are taking some technical support from Russia, including in astronaut selection, training, some life support equipment, some modeling of some technical issues. So the training, the first part of the training of the astronauts will take place in Russia. The second part will take place in India, where also Russia will help us create the necessary schedules and the training schedules for our astronauts. So this is yet another area where India is making huge strides, and Russia, as a very trusted partner, is extending all support for India. When we see the Gaganyaan project go up, when it's launched in 2021, there will be a very strong component of Russian support that will make it a success.
Mr. Ambassador, India and Russia both are facing terrorism. Recently, Russia backed India in UNSC and declined the effort to make Kashmir an international issue. Kashmir is facing cross-border terrorism and extremism. How the two nations are cooperating to counter terrorism and assure peace on their lands?
You see, both countries, India and Russia, have faced the threat of terrorism for many decades. Therefore, it's natural that both countries support each other on the critical issue of counterterrorism. But on the issue of Kashmir, let me say that Russia has remained one of our steadfast and reliable friends for several years. Their policy remains unchanged, which is that Kashmir is an internal issue of India. It should be resolved, any issues between India and Pakistan should be resolved bilaterally on the basis of the Simla Agreement and the Lahore Declaration. This has been reiterated once again in the context of the visit of our External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, who visited Moscow just last week for talks with his Russian counterpart, Mr. Sergei Lavrov. So we are very satisfied and very reassured that Russia, one of the great world powers, stands solidly on the side of India on this issue.
Related, one more question. India has a very constructive role in Afghanistan, and the US has desired to out of the Afghanistan. What is the stand of Russia about India's role in Afghanistan, and do they have any plan to work jointly for the peace in this area?
Of course, the situation in Afghanistan is undergoing a lot of change as we speak. There are discussions that are taking place on what will be the future political arrangement in Afghanistan. Our interest is that Afghanistan remains a peaceful, stable country, which is not a base for terrorism, which has no external interference in its affairs, and the well-being of the Afghan people, with which we enjoy the deepest friendship, for which go back several centuries, is protected. The interest of the Afghan people is protected to the fullest. We also believe that all the progress that has been made in Afghanistan for the last 18 years has to be preserved and built upon. And finally, the peace should return to the country to bring prosperity and peace to the Afghan people. That is our topmost priority. Russia too believes that India has considerable influence in Afghanistan, and these objectives of creating peace and stability in the country is something that is common between India and Russia. So I'm sure in the weeks and months ahead, there will be intensified consultations between India and Russia on the issue of Afghanistan.
Is India going to propose a multilateral platform with Japan and Russia, India?
You see, the Eastern Forum is already a multilateral platform. So by coming here, our Prime Minister is extending hands of friendship not just to Russia, but to all the other participating countries in the Eastern Economic Forum. Obviously, we are a little distance away from Vladivostok and Primoria, but we will be very happy to cooperate with any country in the region that have common interests and common projects, and definitely we will be looking around for new partnerships in whatever form. You mentioned Japan. Japan has already been active in the Russian Far East, and now that India is also stepping up its cooperation activities in the Russian Far East, I'm sure new opportunities will arise, not only in the bilateral context, but also in the multilateral context.
Sir, and India always do legacy for a just and multipolar world. How both countries are working on it, and what is the common approach of the two world leaders in this regard going to meet in Vladivostok?
On the question of how the international situation and the importance of multipolarity, Russia and India have always had a common position. Prime Minister Modi and President Putin have had intensive engagement on this issue, and the commonalities in our positions will be seen in the joint statement that will be issued at the end of the summit. You will see very clear language on which India and Russia stand together. Multipolarity is not just a slogan, multipolarity an operative principle whereby the world is not dependent on any one single source of power or legitimacy. The globalization requires efforts to create an international order that is of interest to everyone. And a multipolar world order, I think that is more stable, more representative, and I think India and Russia will take this forward in the months and years to come.
Mr. Ambassador, best wishes to you from All India Radio, and thanks a lot for giving us your valuable time.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think greetings from far off Vladivostok to all our listeners in India and abroad who listen to All India Radio, and we thank you for the good service that you do to our country.
Thank you.